Welcome to the World Puja Network and Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I'm joined today on this special update on the Orion Project with Dr. Jan Bravo and Dr. Ted Loder, who are all on the board of the Orion Project.org. And thank you, Jan and Ted, for being here.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Same here.
Well, it's a very important update, and we're sort of living and walking through history. And those of you who have followed the Orion Project.org for the last couple of years, almost exactly 2 years, we have been in the process of trying to raise funds, but also identify scientists and inventors who can come forward with groundbreaking new energy technologies to get us off the fossil fuel economy and bring us into the world of at least what Nikola Tesla knew about 100 years ago. And so far, of course, this has been a very big uphill battle. Everyone who's ever tried to do this has hit the buzzsaw of various kinds of chicanery and suppression, and of course our experience is no different. So what I want to do today, and what Dr. Bravo and Dr. Loder will be also doing, is sharing the things that have happened really in the last few months. And sort of to set the stage for those of you who are new to this, a couple of years ago, we had met with a scientist who had worked in a lot of classified projects, who knew about this type of energy system that some have called WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic, so-called transdimensional systems, hyperdimensional physics, zero-point energy, and what have you. And this particular scientist had his work reproduced by some other scientists we know in a government lab that have been able to verify it. And so we were trying to go forward with this scientist and others to develop these technologies. And in 2008, this scientist had agreed to go forward and said that the people he worked with in the intelligence community were permitting him to, and then he sort of vanished. And then a year later, in 2009, after we released the briefing that was put together for President Obama, this particular scientist resurfaced, and Dr. Loder and Dr. Bravo and I and he and some other scientists met here at our farm in Virginia with this scientist in December, early December of 2009, and it was decided that we would go forward together and that he would work with the Orion Project to begin to develop these technologies, and also would eventually leave his current position to work full-time and move up to Charlottesville, Virginia to do this. And so in December, we signed an agreement with him, and we were moving forward. And then, frankly, all hell broke loose. And this is what we really want to bring everyone up to date on. It's important for people to realize that this person had always told us that his soul was owned by the intelligence community, I'm quoting, and that he had obligations, but that those folks had checked us out and checked out what he was doing, and had felt that it was fine for him to move forward with the sort of energy systems that would give us free energy but would not do anything in the way of flying, like a u.f.o. moves around. Those are things that were specifically redlined or not permitted. And so we agreed to just focus on things that would be stationary, Tesla-type energy systems, high-voltage systems that would bring energy out of the Earth's energy field and out of the zero-point energy field and things of this sort, so that we would be able to develop a new source of energy generation that would be a 24-hour-a-day source of free energy and would be much more cost-effective than solar or wind, and certainly non-polluting. So this is what we had all agreed upon, and it turned out that in the past month or month and a half, this particular scientist, as well as 3 other ones, had been pulled back by what I call the beast, Murder Incorporated, that surfaced and basically provided enough disinformation and threats to cause these scientists to back away from coming forward and cooperating. And I think it's very important. I'd like for Dr. Bravo, who really was our manager with this scientist, to sort of share what happened over beginning in March. And I think that so that people get an idea of the way that this happened to us.
I would like to say that I was reviewing emails the other day, and back early on, we do have this wonderful email from this scientist, and he, in that email, told us that he had been cleared by the people for whom he worked, and he also said that he looked forward to developing many technologies and working with us. So he was very excited. This is why we worked with him. This was part of our agreement to work with him because of the enthusiasm that he initially brought to this project. I will say that I spoke with him often. In fact, he contacted me because I was the point person, and we spoke several times a week. For those few months, all the conversation was that things were going well. It was going a little slower than he liked, but that he was working, that we would have the device, that he was anxious to get this device and move on to other devices. So for about 2 months, everything was positive from him. In mid-March, there was suddenly a change. There was a phone call from him, and he said that things were different, and he was getting information that was disturbing. He said that much of this was coming from foreign nationals and had to do with this other work. He continually told me that it had nothing to do with us, and that every risk and every problem to him was coming from foreign nationals, and so he was concerned about this. Interestingly, he said that he was still planning to retire later this year, come work with us, and ready to do that. But over a course of 6 days, in fact, this changed. It went from, yes, I'm anxious and excited about working with you, to, and no, I won't work with you. The disturbing part about this was that he told me over these several days that he was visited by different people. He had calls from certainly the people for whom he worked, the security agencies, and they were feeding him information, and that it was disturbing. Interestingly, he then seemed to back off from us. What is very concerning about this is that he told me on many occasions specifically that we had been checked out by the security agencies. In fact, he told me things that clearly this was true, because he told me things about Dr. Greer and myself, and that he had to know from getting inside information, and it was all fine for months. But all of a sudden, there appeared to be some opposition research that came to him, not wanting him to work for us. In fact, during the time that these 6 days that things were happening, he went from one day telling me, yes, I will, in fact, sign a paper that I'm still going to come up and work with you, to the next day saying, nope, I can't work with you. One interesting piece of information was that during this time, he told me personally he was visited by a former director of the Central Intelligence Agency who had come to him. And this was told to me flat out. And this happened during these 6 days.
Well, I think the thing to remember, too, is that what he was provided with wasn't information, but disinformation, and very virulent disinformation that induced him to go into an absolute tailspin of fear and panic. I'll give you one example of how absurd the intelligence community gets when it's providing Jan referred to u.f.o research, and that's used in the political world in Washington. You can Google u.f.o research or opposition research, and it's when, basically when they distort things and twist things so that things will defame somebody or attack someone. And of course, I think you will probably all remember what happened when John McCain was running in the South Carolina primary against George W. Bush, and they came out with these ads and gossips that his child that he had adopted with his wife were some kind of love child and some sort of scandal, and just one crazy, distorted thing after another. Well, this is what this guy was being hit with, and he was also being hit with things that were almost laughably absurd, except it scared the hell out of him because of what he does in his work. For example, this person has done a lot of work to support anti-terrorism and what have you. He was told specifically that the CSETI protocols, where we train people in remote viewing and consciousness, was being picked up by terrorists so that they could detonate weapons of mass destruction with their minds. I mean, it was just absurd, laughably absurd stuff. So it was one thing after another. But to have a former director of Central Intelligence visit him with a bunch of loaded nonsense, crap, I hate to say it, designed to intimidate. And also he was told that his life was in danger, that he had to be careful where he lived and this and that, and they were going to move him to another site. Then they also brought in audio tapes of conference calls that Dr. Loder and Dr. Bravo and I had with him that proved that it was all under surveillance. Now, you could make a movie out of the last few months and people wouldn't believe it. It's like, after 9/11 happened, everyone said that if you'd put this in a novel on September 10th, everyone would have thought it was the most implausible thing in the world. This is exactly like that, and it's an astonishing story of how at a certain level of this group, which we call Majestic, which has been around since the 40s, suppressing this stuff, they circled their wagons and pulled in the big guns and provided every kind of disinformation and scare tactic to basically wave this guy off and prevent him from proceeding forward with us. But it not only happened to this one scientist, it then happened to another one, and then another one, and then another one. And one of them had worked in an aerospace industry capacity, another one with a major government lab, another one with another major government lab. These were all people with very high degrees and PhDs and different, experience specifically working on these types of technologies for various three-letter agencies, if you get my drift, as well as aerospace. And this all happened within 30 days. I mean, literally within a matter of a few days, what I call the beast clawed back 4 of these scientists. So this is something which is very disturbing. And along with this came some specific threats directed at me and at our team, both legal and otherwise. And I'm wanting to talk about this on the World Puja Network because I think it's very important to people hear the truth in case something terrible were to happen to us. And so I think that, people need to know that this is the kind of thing that's been done. And if you have any question about why we're still using oil and still having collapsing oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico destroying entire vast ecosystems when we haven't needed oil and gas and coal for decades, it's because of the Machiavellian, vicious behavior of people who will do anything to keep these sort of technologies from coming forward. Because I want everyone to listen, all of you, that these scientists were people who absolutely could and have built these type of new energy systems.
And they wanted to. And
they wanted to, very much so.
Yeah, I'd like to pop in here with in addition to your comment, just to set the stage a little bit more. In last December, when we had worked and met with this scientist and several other scientists as a team to decide what to do, we had discussed a number of technologies, and I think Dr. Bravo mentioned that earlier. We had discussed a number of technologies and chose one that could be activated or developed relatively rapidly, and was based on actually some work that Tesla had done and patented 100 years ago. So this was not this was something that already has existed in people's minds, but we're going to use modern day technology to improve on it and make it happen. So that was the thing. A contract. It was not so much agree. It was a legal contract was signed between the Orion Project, which is funded, as many of you know, based upon contributions of people who believe in what we're doing and have funded these things. So we actually had a signed legal contract with the scientist and his team to do this work.
Right.
So here we have, and the work was going along. We had asked for an interim report. We were receiving that. And here, this interference in a signed legal contract has occurred. In other words, these groups that came to the scientists, and as Dr. Greer mentioned, used the u.f.o research and other threats, etc., to stop this, basically were interfering with a legal signed contract.
Right.
So I just wanted to set that stage as part of the understanding of how desperate these people were. And it also told us that when that happens, we were on the right track.
Correct. We were very much on the right track, because you don't pull in big guns like a former CIA director to threaten, intimidate, and provide disinformation to break up an initiative like this unless you're very much on the right track. That's the silver lining to this. But the sad part of it is that this is another example, and this is breaking news, of exactly the kind of chicanery and, frankly, abuse of power of the national security state, illegal abuse. We're talking wiretapping of our conversations illegally. We're talking interfering with a legal contract, as Dr. Loder just mentioned. We're talking threats and intimidation. And as many of you know, in the past year, I have received multiple explicit death threats. And people, a group of what they say is a dozen of these sort of people who are in the process of stalking and intimidating me. And on top of it, have engaged in illegal hacking into my computer with a program called Kill It A, which is a very terrible type of hacking program, I was told by computer experts, that resulted in me having to throw away a completely good computer in the last year. And these are the kinds of things. Well, one of our chief engineers, who's volunteering with the Orion Project, has had his email hacked into and had specific emails that were dealing with a sensitive document that he had gotten from an inventor that was involving a Department of Defense memo, hacked and stolen out of his computer. Now, these are illegal acts. I mean, as you all know, it is illegal to hack into computers. It is illegal to communicate death threats. It is illegal to wiretap people without a valid warrant. It is illegal. So we're talking a whole raft of felonies. We're talking, the kind of dirty tricks that you would think would be in some kind of movie. But unfortunately, this is what we've experienced in the last few months, and it's a very great indication of, number one, that the people who run these classified projects know that we can bring this stuff out if we get one operational, a system, a technology that's operational, and number two, that these scientists we were working with absolutely could do it. So now the question is, what do you do about this? And one of the things I want the public to understand, and I want everyone listening to this to share this interview with everyone they know, for the following reason. Part of our security program is that we have created here in the last couple of weeks a very extensive file that has all of these people's names, phone numbers, addresses, home addresses, details of this that we're not releasing right now because we really don't care to get into an endless legal catfight over these things. But in the event that I am killed or seriously injured or disappear, or if they find some trumped-up reason to, imprison any of us or to arrest any of us. And by the way, there's a man I know who's worked in this area that had drugs planted in his car so that they could tip off the local police and so he could be busted. And eventually it got thrown out. But the kinds of dirty tricks these people are capable of is almost limitless. But in the event that any of those kinds of nasty things are done against us, there will be released to all of you a file, an audio file, as well as scanned documents that have every shred of information of who the scientists have been who have been suppressed, who have been doing the suppressing, the name of this former CIA director who went down there and disrupted this contract, all of that, and all the people, we have tracked down the people making the death threats and the hacking. Now, this absolutely will be released if there's any further actions taken against the Orion Project board or myself or Dr. Bravo or Dr. Loder. And this is sort of a deterrence, if you want to look at it that way, that we're holding this in the event that anything like that were to proceed. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to best to go forward after having gone through this vicious buzzsaw of disruption and disinformation and threats and intimidation. And our whole view here is not to get into endless and probably unwinnable fights with these sort of corrupt powers, but how to bring forward earth-saving, life-saving, humanity-saving technology. And that's what we want to stay focused on. But I do want to say that we have created this file. It's being held by people who can, frankly, walk it into the White House, to the president. It's going to be held by people who can walk it straight into some of the highest people in the media and in Hollywood, and et cetera, and so on. And it will be released to all of you at the World Puja Network. Now, let's hope that doesn't happen, because it's only going to get released under a situation where I disappear, or I'm killed, or they set up some trumped-up thing to arrest me. But this is very important, and I know that these scientists have told me that the people who they work with in the intelligence community listen to these interviews with me and Dr. Loder and Dr. Bravo and the World Puja Network. So we're wanting to say this very explicitly and very publicly, that this is all ready with a trigger, that if anything like this were to happen, this will be released to the world, and it will be, you want to talk about shock and awe, it will be shock and awe, because it's very, very explicit.
Good.
So I think that what people need to understand is that where we are now is that just, over the last couple of years, unfortunately, we've never raised enough money. We had a $3.1 million budget to try to open a small laboratory here and get the equipment in there and staff it. We've only received enough money to provide modest grants to people, kind of working on their own, because you really can't get people to quit their day jobs who are senior scientists and engineers and what have you, without being able to offer them a salary. And we don't have the funds to do that. Moreover, just equipping the laboratory alone was something like $450,000 in different equipment in order to have a proper state-of-the-art electronics lab and fabrication capability that would be secure and in-house. So we never received those funds, so we were trying to do this. But what we've concluded at this point is that people working on their own without any collaborative support and project management aren't going to be able to do this. Now, we hope someone can, and if they do, you'll see at the orionproject.org, we have a protocol that anyone who has a fully operational new energy technology can contact us, and we have some fantastic engineers that are working, like we all are, pro bono. I mean, Dr. Bravo and myself and Dr. Loder and these engineers are volunteering our time. We've never taken one red cent in any salary or any compensation for our time and effort, because we believe in what we're doing. And these engineers are wonderful and very qualified. And so if anyone has a legitimate technology that any of you know about, they can contact us. And so long as they're willing to cooperate transparently and honestly with the testing and reproduction of it, so that it can be verified and shown to be legitimate, we will go forward with that. We're also in the process of completing a fantastic proposal. There's a man that works in the Washington, D.C. area that's done a lot of professional proposals for high-tech and startup companies. And this man is just first-rate. He was referred to us by the guy who's provided me a lot of advice and support over the years on military and government issues. And he is about to finish up a proposal and that he's been collaborating with Dr. Loder that I think is just going to be the best proposal ever put forward in the new energy field. And that proposal is also going to be made available to people who can fund it. So anyone who knows a significant foundation or individual who could fund research and development, it's going to be several $1 million to set up the lab and hire the people. And I want to say that there are many other excellent scientists, and Ted, you can speak to this, that stand ready to work with us. Notwithstanding that these senior government scientists have been ripped back into the belly of the beast. But there are others who are also very brilliant. And so we can absolutely still go forward, and that this proposal is going to reflect the science and be done in an excellent way. So if anyone knows of a foundation or a high net worth individual, or if you know of a group of individuals who, collectively could provide the funding for this, please contact us. Dr. Bravo has been just an angel to get back with folks on that if there's someone who can actually provide this kind of funding support.
Yeah, I'd like to take your comments one step further about we do have a number of scientists and engineers who have come to us over the years, have expressed interest in working with us, but as Dr. Greer mentioned, not most of these, if they're in their professional career right now, are not in a position to actually work full-time without proper compensation and an opportunity ahead. Most engineers, unless they're between jobs, can't just quit a job and go work on something for 6 months and then be out on the street looking for a job again or whatever. So we really need to have a good, I'll call it a bankroll. We need to have a large enough amount of money to set things up properly with the proper lab and be able to hire people with basically a promise of 1 to several years of employment to get to work our way through several of these technologies. And we have probably a dozen various technologies that, with the proper scientists in those fields and some time and the proper support facilities, can be brought to fruition.
Well, yes.
We have more people all the time who are contacting us. But one of the things, let me address that for a second here, and Dr. Greer can add to that. What we cannot deal with right now is people who call us up and say they have a friend who has something in a notebook that he describes, and can we fund it to make something? The answer is no. We are not funding ideas from notebooks, to put it bluntly. We've done some of that, and it's a black hole. We really are looking for a technology that's mature enough to be demonstratable. It really exists. It produces more than a few watts. It produces, hopefully, in the hundreds, if not thousands of watts of power, usable power, running off the grid away from any other input of power, no coal, no oil, no gas, et cetera, et cetera. We really are looking for that kind of technology and need a demonstration model that actually does that at a level that people can see and investors can see. I can see the power in this. Something that lights a couple of LEDs, most investors cannot see their way from that to something running a house. The jump and leap is too great.
Well, not only that, but we have many people who will say also that they have a technology, but we can't really know how it works.
Right.
In fact, we have a group right now that's trying to get us, and the problem with that, I'll tell this sort of apocryphal perhaps, but some years ago when there was a wonderful, wonderful man who was an MIT PhD scientist named Eugene Malov, who unfortunately was murdered, and they recently did discover the people who murdered him. But he was up there near Ted, up in Concord, New Hampshire, and we'd worked for years and years with Gene Malov, and he was a PhD scientist. He's the guy who blew the whistle at MIT about the cover-up and the distortion of the data on cold fusion. And he had helped Dr. Loder and myself and some other people that we have at a laboratory in Washington uncover there was a secret technology that they had that was supposed to be that came out of another country, and it was actually a circuit that was embedded in sort of plastic resin, and it made it look like it was pulling energy in from the 0 point or ether and was making like fans and other things run using much, much less or like half the power that they normally would. And it turned out that all this technology was doing was that it was a clever circuit that was tricking the meters, and it was actually causing what's called a power phase angle shift of some type.
That's correct.
And the electronics people know what we're talking about. But the bottom line was it was a total trick, but a very clever one, and it took some really major brain power to uncover it. So one of the things that we require is complete transparency. I mean, if someone has something that's legitimate, I can say this with some certainty. I can get it to the people so that folks who meet with the President of the United States regularly and all kinds of other people will know about it quickly. However, we're not going to take a black box in there, and we're not going to go forward with, if someone says, well, I have this wonderful thing, but trust me, but you can't know how it works. But, basically there has to be transparency and honesty and faithfulness and trustworthiness for us to go forward. We are professional people. We have very professional engineers. None of us are doing this for the money. We're doing it with the purest of intentions. But we can't afford to have someone kind of involve us in sort of a sleight-of-hand trick. And we've had a number of those that we have uncovered over the years. And unfortunately, we're also not funding just people's ideas, because we have found that unless those people are working in a collaborative situation like Dr. Loder was discussing, where there's a proper lab, properly equipped, and with professional staff on and the right equipment, that they just really, it isn't fruitful. So we're looking for either a significant amount of funding to get the R&D program up and going and stabilized, or a fully operational technology of some type that will be transparently shared with us and without the holdbacks. And we're happy to sign, mutual confidentiality agreements and whatever people would need to be protected. But we're not going to go forward with someone who calls us up and says, hey, we've got this great technology, trust us, how it works, and we're not going to tell you how it works, because there are too many. We have, Dr. Malov and Dr. Loder and I and others have uncovered many, many, many different sort of tricks and fraudulent technologies that are out there. So we have a standard that we're going to adhere to on that we must adhere to, because it's only common sense.
In fact, although we're very aware of the existence of, shall we call it, zero-point energy or unity energy technologies, we're very aware of this. Nevertheless, we tend to be incredibly skeptical.
Exactly. You have to be, because there are a lot of people who are out there who are snake oil salesmen trying to, in fact, there was one group in Texas that years ago, back in 98, 99, that approached us, and it was the people who set that up had built $5 million from various investors to make something that was a complete ridiculous ripoff. And we eventually were able to take it to various labs and prove that it was. But, so unfortunately, luckily we weren't involved in that particular financial fraud, but the people who were just, crestfallen, because these people had been very cleverly doing this. So I think that we know this work. We know these technologies are real on the one hand. On the other hand, just because someone says they have something doesn't make it so. They have to prove it. It has to go through independent scientific testing. It has to be reproducible, because the sine qua non of science is independent reproducibility, meaning that a third party can reproduce the scientific effect and prove it. If that can't be done, then it's not real science. And I think that the other thing is that, the idea of providing smaller grants to people, although, while we have tried that for a couple of years, unfortunately, we haven't found that people just working on their own out of their own little garage or basement or really make any significant progress. It hasn't been fruitful. So these are our new, this is basically a policy decision that the board of the Orion Project has made, that we're proceeding based on significant funding of a professional research and development laboratory staffed up with these wonderful people that we still have to work with us, or someone brings a technology that's already operational. It may be a prototype, a proof of principle prototype, that's fine, but that they're willing to cooperate transparently and honestly in it being evaluated, tested, and reproduced. And if someone claims to have something but they're not willing to cooperate, then we simply can't go forward with it.
We have actually we've used the first 2 years of the Orion Project to actually test the waters on our ideas of how to go forward on this. We're widely known. We have a number of engineers and scientists who have come to us with interest. So we have not wasted our time.
Oh, not at all. In fact, this proposal that we're putting together is the culmination of all this research and
correct.
The fact that we have scientists who can do the work. And I want to tell people that if they know of anyone, by the way, please don't write to us and say, gee, why don't you get Bill Gates to do it, unless you personally know Bill Gates. Because, we get a lot of emails like that, but what we really need is someone who will network the people who are concerned about the environment, energy independence, the future of the human race, who knows people who directly, because anyone can look up the Fortune 500 list of the wealthiest people in the world. But unless you really know those people and can make a sit-down meeting happen, it's not particularly useful to send to Dr. Bravo just random names that you're thinking of. I do think that there are people who are in our network once they hear about this proposal and see it because of the science involved. And there's one other thing I want to share, and I want to be very careful with what I'm about to say because we're enjoined from being too explicit about this. But some years ago, there was an intelligence agent that had tried to get a pretty brilliant scientist and engineers to work with them. And in the process of doing so, allowed this scientist to see a lot of documents and confiscated technologies and patents. And we are in receipt of and have been permitted to use for our engineering and R&D efforts a file that has a few thousand pages of very important documentation, confiscated patents that nobody knows about, and things of this sort that deal with these kinds of energy systems. So this is all, shall we say, intelligence that has been recently given to the Orion Project for research and development purposes, that if we have a lab and some skilled scientists in it, I'm quite sure would hit the mother lode of discovery. Dr. Loder has gone through this file and can speak to it. We can't be too explicit, but I just want people to know that the amount of intelligence and information we have gathered is remarkable and substantial and unique, and that but ultimately, people are not going to be able to do this scattered all over the world out of their basements. We're going to have to be able to professionalize the research and development effort, which was, of course, our intention all along, and it's still our intention. Luckily, we've gotten all this new information, and as Dr. Loder mentioned, in the last year or two, there have been a number of very substantial scientists who have come forward, in addition to these ones that have been recently threatened and suppressed. Thank goodness, who can come forward. And one of the problems with the ones who have been suppressed and threatened is that those were all people who have their pensions with entities that work in a classified area. They have many national security documents they've signed. They're much more vulnerable to being pulled back than these other scientists and engineers that we're referring to who have not been in the secret government contracting world or in the secret government laboratory world. And so, now it would be nice if the President of the United States would weigh in on this and do an executive order liberating these kinds of people and, in fact, ordering them to work on a Manhattan-style, peaceful, free energy initiative. And this is something, if you go to the orionproject.org, there is, I believe, a letter there that you can make your own and send to the President asking that this be done. And we still ask that people do this because we think that the President and the Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, and that your congressmen and senators should hear from you that this technology is possible. And I will tell you this, that if there were a congressional or federal executive presidential investigation of this, we have the names of the people who have been taken to facilities where there are hundreds of these free energy devices in storage that have been suppressed, including one person who called us who's good friends with a member of Congress. But, the question is, will the bureaucrats and the politicians act? Let's see if they do. I think people can write to them and ask that they act, but I think we have to, that doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to act, and we're still going to move forward, even though we've had this rather disturbing and vicious series of events happen and setbacks. I think that, we know that, the same month that all this horrible stuff happens, you see this massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and it just reminds us. In fact, a member of our team who lives down in Florida wrote and said, my God, we're going to have all of these beaches on the Gulf Coast of Florida destroyed and all the sea life killed. And all why? Because, we're dragging up out of the center of the earth and from the deep oceans all this oil and toxic carcinogenic stuff that we haven't needed for literally decades. And that this is a crime against humanity. Truly it is. It's also what I called some years ago planeticide, the deliberate killing of a planet's biosphere with malice aforethought, deliberately. I mean, it is the most immoral, terrible sort of behavior. And the petro-Nazis, as I call them, who are tied into the macroeconomic system that masquerade as national security or masquerade as people taking care of the security of the United States or other Western countries. In reality, that's just all a show, as a mask. In reality, they're looking out after their cartel and macroeconomic interest and their geopolitical power and economic interest. And I think that the people need to stand up and say, we've had enough of this. It isn't drill, baby, drill. It's drill, baby, kill. And, if that was the only way we could get energy to have our civilization stay intact, well, maybe. But we know it isn't. We know that there are alternatives that are much more advanced physics than solar and wind. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot of people to educate themselves on this issue, to get involved, to help us find the funding, and to also get involved politically, to write to the President and to members of Congress that represent you and say, look, we really want to see a change in energy policy that deals with real solutions, not the sort of make-believe solutions. Because, my friends, they're spending tens of billions of dollars of your tax money to put into so-called alternatives and clean coal and all kinds of other silly things that everyone knows isn't going to be the answer. It's going to be way too little too late. And so we really have to look at the future. And no matter what has befallen us in terms of these sort of dreadful things that have been, quite frankly, personally very stressful for Dr. Bravo and Dr. Loder and myself, we're still dedicated to trying to create a better world for our children and grandchildren and to move forward with these technologies, knowing, of course, that we're taking on some of the most powerful and vicious special interests on the planet in doing so. And this has been demonstrated to us with no uncertain terms in the past month, and in fact, indeed, in the past year, where they've set off like a pack of Rottweilers after me. I mean, literally, when I say stalking and death threats and everything else, I'm not exaggerating. We got the emails to prove it. And by the way, there has been an FBI file opened on this. So unfortunately, though, I think that, we'd rather not dwell on all those negative things. What we really want to say is that we're getting a great proposal together. We've got great scientists still to work with us. We have a plan forward, but we need your support, and we need your networking support, and we need your activism. We need for you to actually step up to the plate and get involved and tell people about this. And I think if we do all that and we all play our own role, we'll get to the finish line.
The good news is that bringing people together in one spot and one lab who are dedicated and can do this will not only shorten the timeline to success, but will also provide a layer of security. People are not out there working on their own, and they can't be scared off as easily. So this is a very important fact as well.
It's very much what we did with the Disclosure Project when I concluded that getting people who knew the secrets of the classified projects that dealt with UFOs to come forward one at a time was very difficult. But when you gathered dozens of them together in one place and they took courage from each other, there was not only credibility in numbers, but there was security and safety in numbers. And I think this is what we have to understand. We have to create this dynamic so that the good people and the brilliant scientists who are willing to go forward and who, by the way, are not, say, in debt to the national security state or to a pension that's dependent on the national security state, can move forward safely. And I think that we owe it to the planet, to Gaia, and to to the generations coming to this planet after us to do this. And it is a sacred, I believe, a sacred obligation. And that's why, notwithstanding the sort of the difficulties lately with this, we're still very much devoted to doing it.
Actually, I do want to make one more comment. You spoke about the people who like to keep secrets, who are concerned about their technologies. A lot of inventors are concerned they'll be ripped off or taken advantage of. Actually, we want to help them take their forward technology. Take their technology forward. We want to take it forward with them. We don't want to take it from them,
right,
because it's very hard for an individual to take it forward themselves, as we've seen for the past at least 50 years and really more than that.
Well, yes, and you look at the example of Stan Meyer that had the water-to-fuel car and also other technologies. And, of course, Dr. Loder actually visited with the Orion Project team. We sent a team there to investigate this, and the family decided not to have this material go to the Orion Project. But what was interesting is that one of the most important things that were in that collection was an electromagnetic generator that had a national security order that had been slapped on it. And
that is correct.
And Ted, you want to verify that?
Well, yes, that is correct, and it's interesting because one of the engineers that had worked directly with Stan Myers had told us during our initial discussions that, there's one technology I hope is still there, and it wasn't the water-to-fuel car, although that was very impressive. It wasn't that. It was this other technology that had the national security slapped on it for a period of time. So Stan Meyer's hands were basically tied on technology that might by now be running your home.
Oh, absolutely, and that is not, people say, oh, well, that's sort of an urban legend, a conspiracy theory. It most absolutely was not. Dr. Loder saw this thing, met with the man who had been involved with Stan Meyer at the time that the national security order had been placed on it. This really does happen, and this is why talking to all of you guys at the World Puja Network and you talking to all of your friends and family and colleagues and coworkers and neighbors is so important, because this whole issue needs to be brought out of the darkness and into the light. It has got to come forward, not just with one or two people kind of working by themselves, but with a whole movement of people. And that's the only way it's going to be successfully and safely done, because the people who are tasked with suppressing this kind of information They have too many things in their arsenal, as we have seen in the past month, to throw at people: death threats, intimidation, disinformation, threatening people's pensions. This came up in the course of the last month with some of these scientists, on and on and on and on. And so, this is not a small undertaking. If it was easy, you know what? It would have been done 100 years ago. So, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it is a very large undertaking. It's about transforming the way human civilization lives on planet Earth, and how we as a people will go forward into a good future without pollution, with free energy, the abolition of economic slavery, the abolition of poverty, the creation of a truly sustainable, peaceful civilization. This is doable. And the good news about all of this is that we know that the technology and the know-how is there. The question is there the moral courage? Is there the vision? Is there the dedication? And this is what we need from all of you, is the moral courage and the vision and the dedication to help us do this, because there's no question that the science is there, and we have spoken to that. And by the way, this brilliant proposal that Dr. Loder and this other scientists are working on completing here in the next week or two is going to be rather convincing in terms of the science. And so I think that, and it's not science that's theoretical, it's science that's been done based on experimental data. And so I think that we really do need to get the right people involved with this, who are sources of what I call clean funding. In other words, we don't want to, well, it'd be great if there was some government entity that wanted to fund this. I'm skeptical, because I think that some devil who's a former CIA director, or someone who's now a consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton or SAIC or Lockheed Martin or the Boeing Phantom Works or something, will surface and kill it before the baby can come out of the womb. So I think that, unfortunately, what we have to do is think of where are the sources of sincere funding to support this kind of evolutionary quantum leap forward in energy generation. There got to be people out there, and that's what all of you can help us find.
Very good, Steve. A very good summary of the situation.
Well, I think that what I'd like to say, I don't know if Jan and Ted, if you have anything else you want to share before we conclude.
I just want to actually thank all the people, all the supporters.
Absolutely.
Over the past couple of years. You've been wonderful, and just stay with it, because we will.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everyone. There have been just amazingly wonderful people. We hear from people all over the world, from Australia, from Europe, from Latin America, Asia, all over the world, who are very, very supportive. And the people at the World Puja Network have just been wonderful to help us get the word out and continue to get the word out. And what we have to do is say that even though things get very frustrating, frankly, being in the trenches dealing with these sorts of things, if we look at the not-so-distant horizon of what would be possible in terms of a real transformation of life on Earth for all of us, that this is what has to inspire us, is that vision, and that has to guide us. And if we stay with that, we'll make it through.
It's really the only choice for humanity, period.
Well, there is, and it's either that or back to the Stone Age. And I think that, everyone knows that. And I think that, Earth is speaking to us in a million different ways. I mean, there have been a dozen or more 7.0 and greater earthquakes in the last couple of months. There's been all these things. And now this man-made disaster in the Gulf of Mexico that may, in fact, greatly exceed the damage of the Exxon Valdez disaster, which, up until now was the biggest oil disaster in U.S. history. So I think that, the Earth and it's speaking to us and saying, do something intelligent, do something courageous, do something right. And that's what we're dedicated to doing. And we do thank everyone who's contributed and networked and supported, and who are going to continue to do so. So we'd very much appreciate everything the public have done and all of you have done. So with this update, this is sort of where we are now with the Orion Project. And again, I'd like to thank the World Puja Network for hosting us. This has been conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and also I've had with me Dr. Jan Bravo and Dr. Ted Loder, who have been on the board of directors of the Orion Project and have been dear friends of mine for years. And I want to thank them as well for hanging in there and doing all the work that they do.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.